Welcome to Beyond the Bottom Line.
Good afternoon and welcome to Beyond the Bottom Line. We're very lucky to have Jennifer Cahill back with us again today. She's an evolutionary leader, CEO, entrepreneur, author, speaker, TV and radio host, and she's going to tell us all about creating coherent teams. It's one of the things that she focuses on, as well as vocal mastery for leaders. Welcome back, Jen. I really appreciate you coming back.
Oh, my pleasure, Anna. It's such a delight to be back with you again.
So, creating coherent teams. This is very interesting. You've got a lot of experience in leadership and helping leaders with communication and also with helping them create coherent teams. Most people think about productive teams or effective teams, but they don't really focus so much on coherent. So I'm not sure that they're going to understand what it is. So can you enlarge a little bit on this and also the difference that it can make?
Yes, absolutely. I personally didn't understand the idea of coherent teams myself until about a year ago when I had the privilege and honor of getting to host some television shows for HeartMath related to, they teach it to doctors, nurses, firefighters, police officers, business people around the world. And the moment I began learning about this, Anna, it changed my life. I've been teaching for probably 10 years now, various other classes, such as how to work with empowering teams, how to create higher retention and lower turnover in the workplace. So these were all areas of my expertise as I built and sold my last recruiting company. And so when I began learning about HeartMath, it's so incredible when you think about the idea that a coherent team is a team that actually works cohesively. The word coherent, if you think of the word incoherent, we think of somebody who's kind of babbling, maybe they're incoherent, they're drunk or whatever it is. The same as the idea of coherence is actually being in alignment, kind of going in the same direction. One of the reasons that we're seeing such unhappiness in the workplace and such high turnover across the world in so many jobs in the Great Recession is because nobody is paying attention to, are we all heading in the same direction? We're not looking at what HeartMath calls emotional undercurrents. We often all have emotional undercurrents in our teams. And when I first started learning about this, my gosh, it completely changed my life about 6 months ago when I started deep diving into this work. And some of the things that we don't realize is you can learn actually some great lessons from geese about teams. This is kind of fun stuff for you. But when a goose is at the head of the team, right, there's that one lead goose who's flying. And that person is being met with so much resistance that eventually when that goose gets tired, it falls back into formation and another goose takes the lead. Well, could you imagine, what if we did that as human beings? Or if one goose gets ill, it will go down to rest and two other geese will go down with it to support it. And I'll give you some great examples of this, of like how this showed up in my own life, of noticing coherent teams before I even knew what that meant. So many years ago when I used to run my staffing firm, when we get focused, I'm not sure if any of you have ever been this way, but you get single focused, right? You're working on a deadline, a project, an Excel spreadsheet. And I had one of our key team players, we'll call her Mary. And Mary had tried to get my attention that day. And I was just eyes so focused on my spreadsheet. And I kind of brushed her off. I said, Mary, I'm sorry, I don't have time right now. Well, that particular day, what happened was I was getting ready to leave and I felt something. And this is something I want to point out to all of the leaders out there, all of the entrepreneurs. We sense it. At some level, we can tell when something's off, whether the hairs are going up on the back of your neck, or you just feel that kind of gut feeling that something's off. Or as HeartMath would say, we actually have our heart's intuition, which our heart, if you're not aware of this, sends more information to our brain than our brain sends to our heart. 95% of the information that goes to our brain actually comes from our heart. That's a whole other conversation that we could get into about the sympathetic, the parasympathetic nervous systems and the amygdala and how that all ties in. So I'm going to go back though to the story about Mary. So that particular day, call it my heart's intuition, gut, whatever it is you want, I could feel something was off, and Mary was one of our top performers. And right as we're both getting ready to leave, we were the last two people in the office. I said, Mary, do you mind? I could really use your help for a second. Do you have a minute? And she was kind of like reticent to sit down and talk to me. And she said, fine. And I said, I sat facing her. There's also something about sitting facing somebody eye to eye and the limbic connection that creates.
Yes.
And I said, Mary, I just wanted to apologize. I got a sense that maybe you felt brushed off and ignored earlier when I was in the middle of another project. And I just wanted to see how you're doing. Oh my gosh, Anna, she broke down sobbing. She broke down crying and she said, my nickname in that old business was Jay Hill. She said, Jay Hill, I was literally going to go home and look for a new job. I felt so disregarded and disrespected and unimportant that I was about to leave and go post my resume online. And she said, I just felt like I didn't matter. And I said, oh my God, Mary, I'm so sorry. I want you to know we deeply value you. And it wasn't personal. It was just, something I was in the middle of it. And you have my word. If you need something, do me a favor, just shoot me an email. And then I'm happy during, even if it's a busy day, to give you 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever it is you need of my undivided attention. Would that work for you? And she said, yeah, that would be amazing. And we literally had this beautiful experience that could have wound up resulting in her leaving the company. And she wound up staying a few more years and actually coming with us as part of the acquisition.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
God, it's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Listening to intuition and it's, yeah, it's very, very powerful that.
Yes, going back to the idea of coherence and how coherence does or does not show up in teams, what was fascinating is Google created something called the Aristotle Project, where they
Yeah,
studied and they went out and they tried to figure out what made teams successful, like what made those superpower teams so good.
yeah,
And it turns out it was not what they thought. It wasn't that people lived in the same area or that people liked to go out drinking together or hang out or that their desks were close to each other. In the Aristotle Project, what Google actually discovered is that people who were given an equal opportunity to speak and to be heard, that was one of the key factors in coherent teams. Because I don't know about any of you, but we've all been on a team maybe at some point where someone's grandstanding,
yeah,
somebody else is putting others down. There's all sorts of ways that we're incoherent, and it actually ties back into what we were speaking about on another episode with Arthur about Arthur, Samuel, and Joseph in my work around vocal mastery for leaders and vocal awareness. And it's the idea of listening.
yeah.
Most of us don't listen with the intention to hear what the other person says. Listen with the intention of sharing what we want to get out. And when we can learn to drop our agendas and to practice listening for the essence of what someone says, we actually go through this when I work with teams who are intact and experiencing incoherence. And there are a variety of different exercises that I can take teams through to practice this and to practice actually listening to one another at a deeper level and to begin to identify what are those emotional undercurrents. And really what's astounding to me about all of this work is that individual coherence, so one person being coherent, Anna,
Yeah.
can equal team coherence. So if you have individuals on the team who are incoherent, they're anxious, stressed, upset, then that makes it more challenging for the team to be coherent. And if one person resolves an issue, just like we did with Mary in that circumstance, then that actually creates greater team coherence and greater ability to be productive and to want to work together longer. It's really incredible work.
That's really interesting. But you've just sparked a question, which is going off at a tangent.
Please, go ahead.
But I know originally you're from the States and now you're living in Portugal. So does that mean that you are working with several different nationalities?
Yeah, so we work with people around the world. We can do in-person trainings in offices. I've done it for partner retreats for law firms before. We can also facilitate online Zoom retreats. There's
Yeah.
all sorts of different ways that this program can be modified to be able to support people with what they need. Often it begins with starting to work with the leaders because the leaders have a trickle-down effect. If somebody, this is something I learned many, many years ago, long before I began studying coherence. It's
Yeah.
whoever the executive team was, the managing partner of a law firm or Fortune 500 or any company for that matter, that person's level of coherence and buy-in has a direct trickle-down effect
Yeah.
to everybody else in the organization. So it's often a leader of an organization who will reach out to me and
Yeah.
then we create a strategy and a plan. And there's even a survey that I can give people to see what are some of the emotional undercurrents, and how can we begin to kind of dig them out and then
Yeah.
lovingly, give them what they need in order to feel safe. And people, that's one of the biggest things is people, and Google's Aristotle project also found this, people want to feel safe. And so
Yes.
often in today's workplaces, we don't feel safe and we
Yeah.
feel stressed and so on and so forth.
Yeah. And how do you cope with the different cultures? Because I work a lot with different countries. And if I've got, for example, I work a lot with France because I used to live in France until 4 years ago, and I lived there for years and years. And I help very much them expand into other countries, other cultures, managing other types of teams. And some countries have a completely different vision on values, on beliefs, on priorities. So I find it's not a fight, but there's a big misunderstanding because the concept in one country simply doesn't exist in another country. And it just struck me that with trying to create coherent teams, if you've also got to take into account, say you've got a manager from France, where France is much more top-down management, with a manager in another country or a team in another country, or even a manager in another country, which is much more transversal or something like that, it's got to be really like an added challenge, an added problem to try and get the concepts and the understanding to then be able to create the coherence. Because I sometimes get reactions where people are like, they look at me and I'll repeat it in French because I'm like, okay, they didn't understand my English, and they still look at me. I'm like, okay, it's just a totally different way of thinking. So how do you overcome that type of issue? Because it must be a big issue.
There are two parts to that, Anna. It's a great question. Part number one, I'm going to reference our earlier episode on vocal mastery and filters.
Yeah,
If we see a thing as good, it becomes good. If we see a thing
yeah,
as bad, it becomes bad. And so I think as the trainers and facilitators who come into these situations, and I'll give you a great example of this. Years ago, there was one of the top 5, 10 law firms in the country who I did a lot of recruiting for. I was constantly staffing their whole team, and they had one attorney, we're not going to name names or a firm, who no one would work with. No one. And one day I'm getting ready to go on vacation to Italy, and I get a call from their managing partner, their chief HR person. They said, Jennifer, we know you're going on vacation. Can you please come by our office? This is like code red. We need your help. And I said, okay, I can come in before I fly tomorrow. So
yeah,
I sat down with them, and what we realized was that this particular attorney had a filter, had a reputation, that she was challenging, she was this, and her, oh God, it was the worst PR, even all throughout Los Angeles, where I was at the time, where this firm was. People knew of her, and her reputation preceded her. And so I said, what if we shifted the filter, and what if we shifted the way that we saw her? And I
yeah,
said, what I'd really love is when I get back from Italy, I'd like to sit down with this attorney, and I'd like to talk to her and understand her perspective, her needs, what's going on,
yeah,
and then maybe we can figure out something that works. So sure enough, I get back a couple weeks later from Italy, and one of my first meetings is with this top rainmaking attorney in the Los Angeles law firm. And we sat down, and she was completely different than what I thought, because again, I'd heard all of these things, but she
yes,
and I had never actually spoken. And when I got to know her, I could see that what she really wanted was to feel heard, known, and understood, and yet all of these other things were happening. So one of the things that you can do in that case, similar to what you're saying, but there's a new layer that we're going to add of coherence to that, Anna.
yeah,
Number one, repeating back to people. Most of the time, we might say, Anna, what I just heard you say is it sounds like there have been some times where it might have been really challenging for you, where you went into a situation and there seemed to be some cultural divisiveness between you and the other person. And it sounded like that was maybe really hard to integrate in the teams you were working with. Is that right?
yeah,
So first step one is that you're really going through a process of clarification. Great partnership and coherence in teams also entails going through a process of clarification, just like I did with this attorney years ago.
yeah,
And I kid you not, like as soon as I went through that, and then I talked to everybody about the filters and we shifted how she was perceived, and then I shifted how I was sharing about her, we found her ideal team within less than a year after that, who stayed with her for a long time, much longer than anybody else had. So
Yeah.
step one of that is to, number one, notice, do you have a filter of the team you're working with, or a I can't because of X, Y, and Z, this kind of separation consciousness that we go in with. These are our
Yeah.
biases. These are our unprogrammed biases. Oh, I can't, bring a team in Japan and a team in China together because of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
The moment that we begin to identify that, and then we just put it aside, you can still have that bias, but we're going to put it aside for this. And then step two, which is the coherence piece of the pie, is to help the leadership team and support them, as well as the individuals on the team, with individual coherence. So the
Yeah.
reason, Anna, that we get upset is because we are incoherent. When we're feeling like there's something in heart math that we call the depletion to renewal grid. And so if you could imagine, on the upper left-hand side of the grid are our emotions like anger,
Yeah.
frustration, resentment, those activating emotions. Well, of course, what do those do? Those cause cortisol in our body. And
Yeah.
cortisol does not just impact us for that moment that we're upset for 10 minutes or 5 or an hour, whatever it is, but that cortisol can affect us for prolonged periods of
Yeah.
time. Or on the lower left side of the grid, there might be emotions such as depression, apathy, sadness. And so again, those are also going to create cortisol if we don't get back into coherence. So then you look on the upper right side of the grid, and the upper right side of the grid is more like excitement, joy, fulfillment, a whole myriad of different things. And then on the lower right side of the grid, you might have peace, calm, ease. And the idea of what we teach people in heart math is we teach people what's called heart-focused breathing. And that allows the heart-brain coherence. When we're out of coherence, we are not able to make good choices. We may become reactive. We are not thoughtful in our processes. You actually, when we are disconnected, when our heart-brain coherence is disconnected, it's
Yeah.
almost like you've taken drugs or drank, because you are incapacitated in
Yeah.
some ways to make thoughtful choices when you're going about business. So what we do is we go in and we really work with teams on, number one, identifying what are these filters, what are these undercurrents that are happening. Then what we do is we teach individuals on the team in leadership and also in groups different coherence techniques. And if you want, I can actually walk you through one right now.
Yeah.
Do you want me to take you through one?
Please do. Yes.
Great. The technique I'm going to take you through right now, it has the basis. You and I were talking offline, Anna, about breathing, and many of
Yeah.
us are familiar with Lamaze and yoga breathing and meditation breathing, or some of you might know Wim Hof. Those are all
Yeah.
great breathing techniques, and this is just another technique that is specifically designed to get you into heart-brain coherence, to be able to make more thoughtful choices and be proactive rather than reactive. And the
Yeah.
great thing about these exercises, you can do them with your eyes open. You can do them with your eyes closed. We could literally be in a meeting or podcast right now, and you can do this for yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and read you straight off here so you get exactly the scientific way that this was designed.
Yeah.
And we're going to go ahead and take you in the audience through quick coherence. So the power of quick coherence comes from activating renewing emotions. When you self-generate renewing emotions in the moment, you replace depleting emotions with ones that can renew your system. So as we said, going from that left side of the grid to the
Yeah.
right side of the grid. The technique is simple and each step is important. And as you practice this, you learn how to naturally actually shift your baseline. And as little as 3 months to 6 months, you can shift your baseline to become naturally in a more coherent state, which affects yourself and those around you.
That sounds amazing.
Great, so let's do this.
Okay.
So step one, focus your attention in the area of your heart. Imagine that your breath is flowing in and out right through the center of your heart or chest. Breathing a little slower and a little deeper than usual. Find an easy rhythm that's comfortable for you. As you continue heart-focused breathing, make a sincere attempt to experience a regenerative feeling, such as appreciation or care for someone or something in your life. For example, you could try to even re-experience the feeling you have for someone you love, a pet, a special place or accomplishment. Or one of my favorite things to do is to imagine breathing in calm. When you're feeling stressed, again, imagine your breath is flowing in and out, right through the center of your heart or chest. Breathing a little slower and a little deeper than usual. Perhaps breathing into the count of 5 and out to the count of 5. And as you breathe in, you could even imagine breathing in calm or ease right through the center of your heart or chest. Yeah. And that's just the essence of it.
That's amazing.
It's amazing. You can do it on the go anytime you want.
Yeah.
All you need to remember is heart-focused breathing and then activating a renewing emotion. And of course, HeartMath has many wonderful videos and things you can find on heartmath.com or .org.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's brilliant. When you said imagine breathing in calm, I actually imagine breathing in sunshine, the sound of water and the sound of birds, because for me, that is the happiest place, the most positive, relaxing place. So, it's very, very good. Sorry, I can't speak straight now.
Yeah, it's calm, and you'll notice you have greater clarity and ability to make greater decisions. There's another great exercise called freeze frame, where you can actually freeze a moment in time that maybe you were upset, and then ask yourself, what is a different way that I might have approached that situation? And I have to reiterate, it was such a pleasure and honor during COVID in May of 2020, when I had an opportunity to host these shows with HeartMath trainers from around the world, and hearing the experiences these police officers, the nurses were having during the peak of COVID while they were trying to keep their calm and patients were dying. I mean, my God, just the other day, I'll share with you a quick little story. Anna, one of my friends who I've been coaching for many years, and we coach each other often on things, she had her dad in the hospital, and I had trained her for HeartMath, trained her on HeartMath for many months, and she broke down in tears one day calling me and said, "Jen, thank God you taught me HeartMath. I don't know what I would have done without it. You see, about 2 weeks ago, I was at the hospital with my dad, and there were no doctors or nurses around, and he started convulsing. And I thank God I had this tool that you taught me, heart-focused breathing. I put my hand on my dad's chest, and I started doing heart-focused breathing and got into coherence, and within less than a minute, my dad's body stopped trembling and shaking, and his pain stopped, and he was able to get to a state of ease."
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's just incredible. And there are great studies, like in the class that I teach, in the Coherent Teams workshops that we do, we talk about how HeartMath, and this, what I love about this is all evidentially based. This isn't woo-woo, fun, fluffy stuff. This is actually scientifically, I'm friends with one of the top scientists at HeartMath, Roland McCready, and they did a study where they took 40 participants. And with these 40 participants, 30 of them were trained heart-focused breathing and coherence techniques, which we just went through, and 10 of them were not. And so there were different groups of 4 people, one in the group who was not coherent and not taught the tools, and the other 3 who were. And the one person who was not coherent would always fall into coherence even though they had no knowledge of the tools. And you can even do this one-on-one, that there's less evidence for it.
Yeah. It's incredible. But it's very interesting when you were talking about the scientific effects and the effects it can have on your sympathetic, parasympathetic, amygdala and all of that, because I think I do a program to do with fuel, fitness, freedom and fulfillment, because it frustrates me that people don't actually think about what they eat and their level of energy and the impact that can have on your brain, on your neurons, on your emotions, on your everything. And there's all sorts of scientific proof for that as well, but people just don't believe it or they don't know it. So to hear you talking about that and to hear you saying all the scientific research that's been done and that it's really based on it, I think that is one of the most powerful things and the most powerful reasons for trying to bring that into businesses or whatever situation. Because when you've got people all working together, all trying to help each other and support each other, it completely changes the whole environment. And it just makes the emotional as well as the physical health of people, as well as the productivity for the company, it changes everything. It changes the whole environment. And people can go home at the end of the day. Yes, they might be tired. Yes, they might have had problems, but they can go home satisfied and content rather than going home like that. And it just makes such a difference. It's amazing.
It's an inner battery. In the same way I have a cell phone right here, if I don't
Yeah,
charge this cell phone throughout the
yeah,
day, it's going to die. Our battery, our internal battery is
yeah,
the same. We say that we're the same as a cell phone, and the way we recharge our battery when we practice heart-focused breathing throughout the day, when
yeah,
we're in coherence, that allows us to recharge our battery on the go. You could even do
yeah,
this while you're driving in a meeting.
yeah.
And when we have these depleting emotions, anger, frustration, sadness, depression, it's like having a hole in your boat and you're trying to get to your destination. You're rowing, and yet
Yes,
you find yourself proverbially sinking, right?
yes,
And the only way to plug the hole is to do the work, to get yourself into coherence, and that way you can begin heading in the direction you want to go. Otherwise, you find yourself stuck or drowning, literally or metaphorically,
yes.
with all of the overwhelming tasks that might be confronting you.
Yeah, no, incredible. Thank you so much for that. So any final piece of wisdom or key strategy that we need to know, that we need to keep in mind? I'm always very much into my final pieces of wisdom.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my other favorite things that I love to teach in the program is the idea of our neuron pathways and our neuroplasticity. For those of you who aren't familiar with this idea, I want you to imagine that you have a path that you go down every day. Like how often we walk our dogs, we go with the kids, whatever it is we do. Maybe it's the way you walk to work. And I want you to imagine that path is going through a field. Well, that path, if it goes through the same field every day and you walk that same path, it becomes very well worn, right? Well,
Yeah,
that is like your neuron connections because you're going down that same path of anxious, 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 stress, stress, stress.
yeah,
The incredible news is that with this work, with working on yourself, doing heart-focused breathing and coherence, let's say there was a lesser known path that you could barely even see before. Though if all of a sudden, instead of walking down the well-worn path, your baseline of anxiety, stress, and worry, you begin to walk down a different path. And that path might be calm, ease, effortlessness, whatever that is. Eventually, over time, what's going to happen is that this other new path develops that becomes the new well-worn path, and the old path becomes overgrown. And
yeah,
so too are we, like human beings, like those neural pathways. The more we walk down the same path over and over, metaphorically or physically, that's what's going to help us to reprogram our brains to come into greater states of coherence and, most importantly, personal resilience.
that's wonderful. Thank you again, Jen. It's been a really great interview. So much valuable information. And really, it's inspiring for people who with teams and to create coherence in their teams. It would just totally change the workplace environment. Everything will change with it. So where can people find you and how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way to find me is metabizics, metabizics.com, metabizics.com. And if you go to the contact us form on that page and just put in your information, I'll be sending an email. And I do coherent teams coaching, one-on-one personal resilience coaching, as well as speaking and keynotes. So I would love to hear from you and certainly happy to help in any way I can.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on the show again. Thank you
Yeah.
for everything. It's been a real pleasure to see you again.
My pleasure. The pleasure is all mine, Anna. Thank you so much to you and your audience for graciously having me again and intending that perhaps everybody walked with some personal piece of wisdom or value that you can take out into your life. So thank you for your time.
Lovely. Thank you.